I think we've got time for two more. Um, and we're going to end off you and I's little recording session with one more horror v horror for me and one more for you.
All right, sounds good.
So go ahead and spin your horror wheel,
Oh boy.
and we'll get into um, the final scenario for me.
All right. Again, he's not necessarily horror, but he is a villain, and this movie can be considered, I guess, semi-scary. But it is Imhotep from The Mummy.
No, that counts as horror. That's The Mummy. It's more of an action movie, yes, but that is indeed The Mummy. Now, Imhotep, I believe, is also the Mummy from the original Mummy movies.
I mean, the Brendan Fraser ones. Yes, and
Yes.
I think he's also the like Boris Karloff.
Yes, the
All
the
those as
OG
well.
Mummy,
Yes,
which
Boris
mean
Karloff was him too.
which
So
means that we can roll with either of those because I did not mention this before, but you can, unless I guess you're specific about it, then any version of this character counts. So like if we had like say Spider-Man, then you
mhm.
can go ahead, you can use like just the Tobey Maguire one if you want, or like comic book one, but we already used Jack Skellington. I'm not using him again. So we've had the Mummy. Actually, no, I don't think the Mummy has ever fought Dracula before.
Ooh.
Um, but this isn't exactly the Mummy versus Dracula. This is the Mummy versus the Count.
You mean as in a one?
Yeah. I mean, the
A
Count from
two.
Sesame Street.
Ah.
Is the Count from Sesame Street a horror character? Absolutely not. However, he is a vampire, therefore he counts for a Halloween special.
I agree. He has an evil laugh. I mean, one. So I mean, yes, he is. He's part of this genre.
Yep. So, how do they come together? All right. Well, okay. For those of you who do not know, Imhotep the Mummy. Actually, you know what? He's your character. Go ahead and give us his backstory real quick.
Oh well. I mean,
It's the same in both movies.
yeah. So he is resurrected, and I've not really seen the Boris Karloff one, so I know him from the Brendan Fraser Mummy,
Hmm.
and uh he's the high priest, and he kind of wants to take over from the pharaoh that he is under, but he also loves the wife of the pharaoh, and
Hmm.
they have a little thing on the side going on, and she kills herself to not be with her husband anymore, to be with Imhotep, and he has to resurrect her.
Hmm.
Everyone is trying to stop that from happening, as well as trying to put him back. But Imhotep was cursed because he was buried and mummified alive. But they cut out his tongue so he could not talk.
Hmm. And when he comes back, I don't exactly remember what causes him to return in the Brendan Fraser one. Um,
They
don't they read from a
read
book?
from the book
Ah,
of the dead.
I see.
Yes.
Yeah. Then he goes around and like rebuilds himself by like taking people's tongues and eyes and stuff like that.
Yes.
Since you have not seen the Karloff version, it's actually the Brendan Fraser one is a pretty faithful reboot of that one actually, because it's the same general plot. It's the same one of like he comes back as like a mummy, and then
Mm-hmm.
he slowly like has to take back like the pieces so that he can look like a person again. And then he, at the end tries to sacrifice a girl that reminds him of, his beloved so that he can bring her back as well. So it's the same premise. It's just the Brendan Fraser one is more heavily like an action movie than it is anything else. Because there's a whole lot of action going on in there.
yes.
The old Mummy is more like a little bit suspenseful, a little more like almost noir style type deal. Um, if you ask me, out of all of the Universal like classic monsters, the Mummy is probably the weakest one. But it is the only one where, as they like continue the Mummy like franchise, like the second movie and third movie and stuff, they're all different mummies,
Mhm.
and like some are like more violent than the others, but the first one is Imhotep. Meanwhile, the Count is a vampire muppet that likes to count things. And he lives in Sesame Street somewhere. This is why we have it's two classic monsters, a mummy and a vampire, except one of them is the Sesame Street Count and the other one is a full-on threat. Um all right, I'm going to bend things a little bit. On this episode of Sesame Street, it features special guest Brendan Fraser. and, and Brendan Fraser comes on, and he's doing his thing being Brendan Fraser. This is an older episode of Sesame Street, by the way, because I don't know what's happened to Brendan Fraser recently.
I
No
stick
one
with
wants to hire him anymore. I guess he
stick
just
with the
got
past a little. Brendan Fraser, I think, is the best at this point.
yeah, I like him.
I do too.
um,
I don't have a problem with them. I
so you know what, he's on Sesame Street because he's promoting the Mummy movie.
There we
And
go.
yeah, and he is, doing his thing, like he's playing basketball with the kids. He's taking Big Bird to like Mr. Hooper's and getting cookies and stuff. And but suddenly, once he reaches um like the count to go and count things or something, um he goes to the count, and the count's like, do you have anything for me to count? And he's like, well, I do. I was actually on the set of my movie, The Mummy, and I brought back some of these artifacts. And he's like, one, two, three, three, three cursed artifacts. and And just like in the ride, the Mummy, the ride at Universal, at the end, it doesn't have Brendan Fraser in like an actor's chair or something. And he's like, all right, it's over. But then it's like not over.
He never got his cup of coffee.
Yep, exactly. It's that. So he's like, wait. And then the count's like, wait a minute. What is this? One. One Book of the Dead. And then Brendan Fraser's like, yeah, that's the Book of the Dead. Turns to the camera. You guys know how to read?
Oh God.
Let's find out. So Brendan Fraser is now reading the Necronomicon on Sesame Street, and he's like, and then and then suddenly the count's like, hey, one, two. Basically, this goes on for a long time. He's like, 1,000, 1,000 scarabs, and Brendan Fraser's like, wait a minute, the curse, it's real, turn back. So Brendan Fraser goes, and Imhotep arrives at the Count's castle. Oh, how do they fight? They have to fight somehow. And the Count's like, and the Count, being a vampire, is like, wait a minute, I didn't invite you in. And so Imhotep is going after, Brendan Fraser and the real life Brendan Fraser and the Count, because the curse is real now. Imhotep is real, and so the Count now has to stop Imhotep from wrecking his home, and so they're like going at each other, and you have that guy that plays Imhotep in the movie like going at him, but like the Count's like little Muppet hands are like holding him back. And he's like, stop. and he's like taking out like numbers. He's taking like numbers out, and he's like smacking them with. And Imhotep is like, they're both talking shit to each other. Imhotep's like, "You do not know my power," or something like that, and the count is like, "I count one, one bitch." And it's like he's like smacking him with like numbers and stuff, and basically that's. I'm just gonna cut it off there, but that's how Imhotep and the Count end up getting pissed off at each other because Imhotep is not being a very good guest, and he is assaulting Brendan Fraser, the Count's actual guest, whom he invited in, and now the Count is and Imhotep's also summoning so many scarabs that the Count cannot count them all, and that infuriates him.
I also think it's funny if like because there's the thing of like if you drop rice and you tell a vampire they have to count it, like a vampire has to stop and count that. It'd
Yeah.
be like before he's fully formed, he drops like scarabs and he's like, "Oh, count that," and then the count's like, "I got a one scarab."
Ah, ah.
And he's like,
Ooh. Ah, ah.
so then the mummy's like, "And out."
The
He just keeps
visual.
dropping scarabs to distract him.
I'm imagining the visual of the Count like picking up like the foam like letters of the like numbers of the day. He's like picking up like a one and just like stabbing the mummy with it.
He's like, "Why won't you die? One,
3
time."
stabs. Alternatively, I think originally I was thinking like I want the Count to somehow go to Egypt and count, but I don't know. I think I'll go with Brendan Fraser being the guest on Sesame Street to promote the Mummy. Little does he know that the Mummy, the curse is real. Um, and yes, that's where this goes.
Or I was like, what if him and the guy playing the mummy went, and then
Uh-huh.
like the count was like, "Oh no," and then it's like the curse is real, and the guy's like, "No, I'm just an actor," and it's like him just fighting off.
Yeah,
He's like, "No, we must put you back," and he's like,
and
"I'm not real."
the joke continues. When I had Preston on, he had a Kermit the Frog scenario, and the puppeteer is still like under there, but the puppeteer is like not acknowledged at all. So like, Imhotep could logically hurt the puppeteer, but doesn't. He's just going with the illusion that all the Muppet characters are like real, and is just like smacking the Muppet, even though there's a performer underneath that's like.
And just at one point, the performer just like, "I'm out," and it's just him like holding and like fake fighting it by himself
Yeah,
because
like
he's down to.
where he's doing that like the really bad effect of like, no, get off. But no, the Imhotep is real, and he has been summoned by Brendan Fraser teaching children on Sesame Street how to read the Book of the Dead, and he comes into the Count's place uninvited, and bringing too many things for the Count to finish counting. So the Count has to start. I have to start smacking a bitch. Start throwing numbers and shit at them. There, I'm satisfied with that being my last scenario. So,
I I think that was a good one. I think.
well, that's definitely one of my favorites. Um, and now let's do yours.